Mm-hmm. Now let's go to Bristol. Tony, Ali mentioned an interesting point, and that was the U.S. elections around the corner. And this should be a very good propaganda ploy, probably, for President Trump, huh?
So, but we have to look at who is al-Baghdadi. I would say he is a creature of US, Saudi, Swiss, Israeli proxy warfare. Don't forget where he came from. He was arrested, I think it was in Fallujah, after the battle there, horrendous battle and massacre by the United States in Iraq, and released apparently in 2004 from Abu Ghraib. But there are also some people in the US military who say, no, he was never released. He was just transferred to Buna jail, another jail, where he was kept for a further 5 years and then released in 2009. So even that is not entirely clear. What is clear is that the United States had hold of him and then they let him go. So why did you have to ask, did they let this guy go? Well, Senator John McCain, the far right-wing Republican, was involved in all of that. And there's pictures of Baghdadi with him, and in that I would suggest he was released because he was going to play a great role, he thought, in a kind of fake Islamic prophecy scripted in Hollywood by Hollywood and the Pentagon. Actually, what we should really be calling that, I think, and we don't hear this kind of word very often nowadays, it's more a medieval word, is a heresy. The idea is that this whole idea of ISIS or ISIL, of Daesh, had been basically dreamt up by the Saudis and the Americans, cooked up by the Wahhabists, and Baghdadi fitted the role perfectly because he'd fallen for it hook, line and sinker. So he's a creature, I think we have to really understand this, not of the Middle East or Arab culture in any way. He's just a tool, a mercenary effectively working for the US. But whether he's dead or not, I mean, we really don't know because we've heard this many times before, oh, he's been killed. But it would make sense as an election ploy, certainly, for Trump to decide that they finally decided to kill who is effectively their own person. They don't want him running around on TV in the future, do they? Explaining exactly what really happened behind the scenes, because this is all supposed to be a secret operation by the US intelligence.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Let's go back to Beirut. Ali, Tony rightly mentioned the point. You know, you also mentioned that this is a good time for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to be killed. I mean, what about the history of what the U.S.'s performance? You know, because Mr. Trump was also talking about this, and I remember during his campaign he was actually blaming other officials, his predecessors, for creating terrorist groups like ISIS or Daesh. So, is this what the U.S. is doing? Making this trouble in some part of the region, then moving it elsewhere to wreak havoc elsewhere in the world to maintain military presence there, and then finally finishes the person off and takes all the credit for that?
Well, many people do have this belief that, you know, America draws up these plans and then takes out the person. You know, I'm not sure. I can't say that I agree with it. I can't say that I disagree with it. What I do know is that the United States has before used any means possible. If you look at, for example, what they did against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, there they supported the Mujahideen over there. Those so-called Mujahideen in the end turned out to be Al-Qaeda, and they attacked America. They bombed US embassies in the 90s, if you remember, in Kenya and in Tanzania, and then they launched the September 11 attacks. So if you ask me, I think this is short-sighted American policy. If you look at what they did in Libya as well, their actions in Libya in the end led to the killing of an American ambassador to Benghazi, if you recall, Christopher Stevens. Right. So the Americans do have a history of, you know, doing such actions, but at the same time it backfires against them. You know, they themselves have been done harm. So I don't think that this reflects in any way whatsoever some kind of a wise US policy. In Syria, by the way, they did it as well. If you recall, John Kerry, if I'm not mistaken, said that, you know, we could use ISIS in order to put pressure on President Assad to make some concessions. So while I can't say that America has created these groups, you know, I don't agree or disagree with that, but what I can say very, very with all certainty is that America has taken advantage of these groups. Yes, I think that is something which we can be crystal clear about.
Okay, we'll go back to Bristol and have the final comments of also Tony Gosling regarding this. Tony.
Well, I think what's really happening here is what we've seen with the troops, US troops moving into Iraq, even though the Iraqi government don't want it, is we're inching towards the normalization of criminality in the world, and there is a sort of, well, I mean, look at this. We've got the state terror in Britain going on against Assange. I mean, he's basically being drugged to death in Britain, even though he's committed no crime. We've got the war crimes becoming normal, drones, regime change in all different parts of the world perpetrated by the West. We've got domestic here in the UK, organised crime. The police take no action against it. People trafficking, drugs and prostitution. We've seen the death of nearly 40 people in a container because the organised crime is basically, the police do nothing about it. One or two chief constables in Britain, right? But this is a much bigger, what I'm trying to say here is there's basically a mass media is complicit in this, because we've seen all these different things. They're putting them across as individual different stories, but actually it's one strategy, and that strategy is moving towards war, towards police state, and towards Iran and Israel conflict, which they hope that the West will come behind that conflict on the Israeli side. I think that World War III is going to be launched by Israel at some point. The West will go along with it, and then you'll see Russia and China opposing them. But this, I think, is the longer game, and Baghdadi is just a small pawn that cannot be allowed to survive because he knows too much.
Okay. I appreciate your comments. Ali Resk, political commentator, joining us from Beirut, and Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol. And that's the end of this news review. Thank you for watching.